I said talk to me, damn it, or else I'm gonna throw you in the fire!
You stupid bitch, you filthy... Flyover State of Fear.
Welcome back, everyone, to Flyover State of Fear. We've taken a little break while I decided to go get married again for the second time in a year. But we were joined here to the same woman, if you're new. We are joined here today by some awesome guests, Kayla and Chris of Cult or Just Weird podcast. How are you guys doing today? Thank you for joining us.
Doing all right. Excited to be able to talk about scary stuff.
I'm super excited that you're gonna have some awesome guests. Obviously, that's not us.
I know. Some later, but we're here for now.
I said I scrubbed around. You guys seemed awesome. So no, but thanks to our super producer Yusuf for setting this up with us. Today we're going to talk about the Blair Witch Project. But first, just tell me about yourself, guys. And then we'll...
So we're Kayla and Chris. We are co-hosts of Cult or Just Weird. We're also married. That's secondary to the podcast, obviously. We have most of our time talking about cults and niche
weird things,
cults and just weirds.
A lot of MLAs, a lot of crazy weird sex cults like NXIVM,
right?
A lot of stuff like that. I've talked a lot about QAnon.
It gets scary. It gets weird. It's such a way to relax. Day job. I'm a writer. I write for TV, so this is exciting to be able to talk about a movie. And
I'm a game designer and data scientist, but I think it's more fun to talk about pop culture.
Yes.
Sure. That's all we do here. Talk about pop culture. No, that's awesome. And I mean the cults, you could either be, I guess, are the most cults scary? I only know, what I've read.
We do such a wide spectrum on the show that it's like some of them are, some of them are like pretty freaky, like some of the stuff they get into, or at least like the ones that are more abusive certainly are.
Sure.
But then there's groups that are, less abusive, less destructive, and those are more just like odd.
Right.
than scary, I guess.
I mean, one of my favorite episodes we've ever done was about a group that I thought was going to be scarier than it was. It was about a group mostly on Reddit of people who create tulpas. And tulpas are basically, it's kind of like an adult imaginary friend on steroids. So people are like, I want an imaginary friend, but it is going to be a completely separate psychological identity that also lives in my brain. So it's kind of like, from an outside, from a me perspective, researching it, it felt like, are these people giving themselves some sort of disorder? Is this madness?
That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, there's certainly some sort of multiple personalities going on, but for the most part, it seems to be like non-pathological.
It was just a lovely episode. It's a lovely group of people. It wasn't scary. It totally, it's definitely weird, and I think that anybody in the community will be the first to say that it's weird. But it's nice to stumble upon those groups every once in a while where it's not scary, where there are nice things in the world when they are weird.
No, that. I want to listen to that. That sounds good. All right. So I start off, ask all my guests kind of, do you like horror movies, right? Like I always say, no one needs to be on this show that can actually like horror movies or genre or all of that. So if you like, do you guys like them? And then if so, kind of, do you have an origin story of horror or like a early memory? And, just kind of go,
I'm particularly excited to talk about this. I think that we kind of have different ways of coming to horror.
Very different.
I grew up with it. My dad used to stay up very late, and he would love to watch really bad B horror movies from the den, and the den was down the hall from my room, so I could hear everything.
Sounds
so
like a dad.
It was fantastic. It was he was watching. I mean, like we're talking Jeepers Creepers, we're talking
Yeah.
Motel Hell, we're talking some of the goriest and grossest and best. Just mwah.
Just schlock. Yeah.
Just perfect. And so I would grow up hearing this, and I would sometimes sneak down the hall and try to watch. And I think the first real horror movie I watched was with my dad, and it was when he decided my sister and I were old enough to watch Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds with him, and we
Okay.
stayed up very late. Like I remember, I don't know, I was 7 or 8, somewhere in there, and it just felt so special. We got to sit in the den where I know that my dad was always watching these movies and watch The Birds, and I physically felt different before and after. Like I very much
Oh,
remember
that's cool.
there was a time before The Birds, and then there was a time after The Birds.
Really?
Yes, it was.
I
It was. I don't know.
No,
Are you
it's
terrified
that's
of birds
neat.
now?
I mean, yes.
I remember the Birds playing at like my grandma or great aunt's house or something, and not similar experience at all. But I definitely know that age, 7, 8, and it's like
Right.
on, and there's a different look than anything you had seen at that time,
Right.
at least for
right.
me. So I totally get that. I mean that
And
seeing
there's
it.
no explanation for like what the hell is going on with the birds. And as a child, used to watching, like Eureka's Castle and David the Gnome, very tidy storylines to have. Oh, we don't really know why the birds are doing this. They're just attacking people. Oh, and here's somebody's
An
either
angry
act out.
bird.
Yeah, it's literally
It's just
angry.
chaos.
Yeah, yeah.
Chaos and Alfred Hitchcock abusing his actresses.
Oh,
Not great. Yeah,
No, I'm
not great.
totally.
It's 2021, man. We got to separate the art from the artist. Or we're all gonna
I will.
absolutely
I
crazy.
doing research for Blair Witch today, like where the Birds came up in one of the lists of like actors who weren't acting, and
Right. Him and Kubrick, man.
Do not condone those techniques.
No, it's not great. My origin story is pretty different than yours. Like I didn't consider myself into horror until we got together and you started showing me some horror films, and by that time I was in my late 20s.
Right.
There were some exceptions. So there's like 3 exceptions I would say. I did watch Plan 9 with some friends in high school just because it's Plan 9, and it's more because it's like, worst movie ever status than horror
party
status.
movie.
Exactly. And then I did watch Misery. I was able to watch Misery with my parents.
I love
I thought it was,
Misery.
like not quite as
With your parents?
yeah.
I watched it with my dad.
It's such a like that's. I mean, yeah, I think I watched that
It's
with my
terrifying.
parents as well. But it's just
But
that's a hard movie.
But the thing
Yeah,
is,
it
it's
was-
not like there's no like body horror. Well, okay. Aside from
it's all by it's
Hold on.
aside from the one key scene, it's not like gory, so it's not like parental.
I don't
so
know.
there's no sex,
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
I don't know. Whatever.
I
Look,
remember-
you have to ask my parents. I don't know.
Hey, man, I'm with you. I remember very vividly being at home with Snow Day and it being on like TNT or something, maybe the 6th grade, 7th grade, and being like really into it. And like I don't know, I'll show my kids that movie at that age. I'm with you. I get it.
Yeah, it's a great film.
Perpetuate the cycle.
The only other
Yeah.
exception was I really, for some reason, and I didn't even think of this as a horror movie until like much later. I thought of it as just like, oh, it's thriller action detective movie. But I saw 7 in the theaters when I was like a young teenager, and again, my mom took me and my best friend at the time to go see it.
Your mother's not a horror aficionado.
No.
She like
She's on the opposite end of that spectrum.
loves
completely.
Disney. Like
Yeah.
very different.
She's like very wholesome.
Very
like,
wholesome.
don't drink, don't smoke, what do you do type person. She'll get drunk on like a thimble full of sangria, and you know what I mean? Like she's just the most wholesome person. So I don't even know, like I can't even imagine her going to see 7 for her own purposes, much less taking her teenage son to go see it. It just doesn't compute at all, but it's still
just the detective story.
somehow.
It was just
That's interesting. I don't know how that happens.
I don't either.
I've heard stories of people like parents taking, their kids to take movies, then they didn't realize it. And half the times, like the stories I've been told, not the 7 one, that makes sense, was just like I think the kid were lying about their story. It was like, my mom took me to go see Child's Play and she didn't know what that was. And I'm like, that's a lie. You just saw Child's Play as a kid.
Yeah.
But no, that's just an intense movie to see in theaters as a kid. My friend, we saw Dawn of the Dead is in the theaters as kids, and that's when we were like, yeah, we like horror movies. Like, this is cool. It's funny.
Right.
And then I immediately wiped it away when I rented Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses, and I'm like, I'm disturbed again.
Yeah, there's
Right.
slightly different genre tone there. Yeah.
I think with Seven, maybe some of it was the market. Like, it wasn't quite marketed the same way. You know, like you said, like Child's Play, it's obviously a horror.
Right.
Seven is like, oh, I like Morgan Freeman. You
Yeah,
know,
I mean, I could see how someone maybe she thought it was like another. What movies was it? Alex Cross? Was it David Cross? Like Along Came Spider, like just a detective movie.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So
like
it is.
more-
But the visuals were very brutal, and I don't even think, you know, you're asking like as a kid. I think like 80% of it I just didn't even register with me.
Sure, like
Yeah.
do you register that the
No.
dildo, the knife dildo
No.
piece, right?
In fact,
The
you could even
machete
ask
strap on
Yeah.
makes sense for a 12-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, when I told you the story, you asked me, you were like, "What did you think about that scene?" And I was like,
That's like
"What scene?
The scene.
I don't even remember." Like,
You blocked
clearly
it out.
something, like I just didn't even, whatever it was, just didn't click with me at all.
Right. So, and that was kind of it for you though, because when
Yeah.
you and I met, you hadn't seen Blair Witch, you hadn't seen like
Paranormal Activity. I
you
hadn't
had
seen
some of the classics
Halloween.
and the
I
modern
hadn't
classics.
seen
okay. So you really,
almost anything, really.
yeah. My
And that
my
was-
wife won't watch any horror.
Oh really?
So,
Oh,
no. I mean, when we first started dating, she did, and I took her to see some things that now I'm like, why did you even agree to that? You should just said no. It was like Sinister and the Evil Dead remake.
Gotcha.
You know, really intense. And she's like, oh, I just looked at my feet the whole time. I'm like, you're too polite. Now she's like, absolutely not. So I get it.
Good for her.
Like,
Good
taking
for
a
those
stand now,
boundaries.
yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
corrected you. I mean, I feel like it was very slow. It was you weren't averse to it, but it was more
No.
not really something you were interested in. And it was Paranormal Activity. It was a combo of, it was like a 1-2 punch of Paranormal Activity and then that French movie. Do you remember that French movie, High Tension? Have you seen High Tension?
Oh, High Tension was
No,
really
I'm
good.
not familiar.
Highly recommend.
spoilers.
Okay.
No spoilers. Like
I will.
very scary, like home invasion / psychological thriller. It's fantastic, and
great.
that was one of the ones that brought you around.
Yeah, that definitely brought me around. And I think there's also like, I think that I had not seen a lot of horror movies. I didn't know that horror movies frequently, or like the good ones, have this like, it's like sci-fi where there's like this message behind the message, right?
Sure.
Like sci-fi is always about something other than what it's about. And that was a big thing that like made me kind of go like, oh, I didn't even know that.
Right.
So
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Horror could be like, it's a weird genre. Like, because it could be high art, right? And I mean, right now you're seeing the last several years, like the flood of like the best horror movies are more of high art, right? Than
Mhm.
like your Hereditaries, your A24 movies, than
Right.
mhm.
more throwback to like, not what we're talking about today, but like, you know, your 70s films or late 60s where they were like more family dramas all,
Right.
and they had
Right.
a lot had something to say, and then like, so it's just it's a wide genre because you could talk about slashers, you could talk about monster movies, and then you could talk about things that
Mhm.
have a lot to say, and you sit
Yeah.
there and go, oh, this should have won Best Picture instead of like just this melodrama.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Like what was the other one we were gonna watch? We were gonna maybe do for this episode was what was it?
Alien?
Oh, Midsummer.
Oh, Midsummer.
Midsummer would have been, I thought when you guys mentioned cults, that is very up your. You
Yeah.
should do a special on your podcast. You could just do a special on your podcast all about
Oh,
Midsummer.
We've actually talked about doing that, specifically Midsummer, because, and again, it's like the type of thing where
Wicker Man.
it's about
Right, it's
more
just-
than what
it's
it's about. you
modern
know,
Wicker Man.
It's
Sorry.
like
I interrupted
oh, that's right. No, I was just gonna say like Midsummer is like, it's about like other cultures being scary as much as it is about just the pure horror of what's going on.
Right.
Right.
Sure.
Or like, you know, Get Out is about more than what it's about, and so is Blair Witch. By the way, I just want to say one funny thing that I always like. There's always, whenever one of these movies is released, there's always like an article that somebody writes that's
Oh.
like, you know, this horror is not usually like this, but this
Every
movie
time.
about, yeah.
Every time.
And then it's like, bro, do you just not watch horror movies then, or like?
So before we dive into Blair Witch, funny you mentioned that because there was like I don't know, it's one of those document or top 10, blah, blah, blah. And I picked this up and I've been spouting this out for years. Horror historically lines up to what your culture is doing. So, like in the 50s or whatever, like Red Scare, communism, that's why you have monster movies of like invasions and all this, skip around, whatever. Mid 2000s, Saw, post 9/11, very like hostile time. They explain it better in that thing, but it for the most part, what is selling is what's the modern fear in the world right now. That's why something like Black Mirror is so successful these days. It's all about technology. Anyway, so speaking of technology, I guess when we don't have, and I'm terrible at segues, we're here to talk about Blair Witch, 1999's Blair Witch. I think one of the most interesting picks you guys could have picked, just not about the movie, but what this movie did.
Right.
Just real quick, it's the most profitable film of all time in ratio. It had a budget, they don't know exactly, but it's between $200,000 and $500,000, but it made $248.6 million. And just really basic premise. Group of student filmmakers want to make a documentary about an urban legend in a Maryland town about the Blair Witch, who's that town's urban legend, and everyone kind of has different stories, and they get lost in the woods, and that's the plot.
And it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And I know it is. I was explaining to someone today about it because I was talking about this podcast, and I was like, this movie we will never recreate again.
Right.
What it did culturally and just what audiences thought.
Right.
So really, because I could just spew whatever. What are you guys? What are your experience and thoughts with this movie? To start, like, because I know I'm 29, and I vividly remember 1999 when this movie came out. I remember my brother coming home and being terrified. He's 4 years older than me, and being like, "Oh, you can't do this." I remember my cousin showing us the website. Like, I remember all this stuff. I remember little things like that. And then eventually one day I saw it. I went, "Oh yeah, that was scary." But I didn't, experience it in that theater at that time. But I'm very familiar with the what this has done. So what is?
I had a similar experience to you, and I want to take it because I love my movie. I'm a little bit older than you, and I was still a little bit too young to have seen it in theaters, especially because it was such like a breakthrough at the time. There was nothing else like it. There were literally people talking about, is this an actual documentary?
Mm-hmm.
Have people actually gone missing? Is this real footage? Is this a fake movie? We don't really know. And that was very much played up by the studios and by the filmmakers. So I had all that cultural context as like a 12-year-old or however old I was at the time. And I also had an older sister that went and saw the movie. I'm pretty sure her boyfriend was one of those people that got affected by the handheld.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So new at the time. There'd been very few movies that had done this handheld style, very intense documentary style footage for a non-doc film. I think that he barfed at one point, like got the motion.
Yeah, I remember that being the thing of like you'll throw up, but it was because of the camera, not like anything in the movie.
Shaky camera work, yeah. And so by the time I saw it, it had this whole like mythology built up around.
Yes.
And when I saw it, I had a group of friends when I was a kid, and we would get together once a month and watch scary movies. We called it Scary Movie Night, and we would like that's when I saw The Shinings with them. That's when I saw, I think, The Ring was with them. Just kind of got my good classics in there. And for my friend's 13th or 14th birthday, she wanted to watch Blair Witch, and she wanted us all to camp out in her backyard in a tent.
Oh, that's cool.
And her parents ran, an extension cord out from the house and put a TV in there and watched Blair Witch at night in the dark in a tent. And of course, we're all young teens. It was very much playing the that was good, but I'm not scared. I'm not scared right now.
Terrified today if I watched that out there.
I was terrified. I was so scared inside. I remember scooching as far away from the tent wall as I possibly could because I thought something was going to come up and touch me. And not in the woods. We're in my friend's backyard.
Doesn't matter.
I'm done with camping with them. I'm a Boy Scout. And I don't want to camp.
I don't want to camp ever again. Eventually, we retreated into the house. We were all like, "Oh, we're not scared, but I don't think we're going to sleep tonight. So let's just go inside."
And isn't there? So I assume you guys watched it on probably VHS, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Isn't there something with
very early DVD? Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't there something different about maybe just the kid nostalgia of like watching the Blair Witch specifically on a physical VHS that seemed more of like, yo, we got a copy. Like these people are actually dead.
Right. It's
right.
It has that
That's how I've
aesthetic, and you're watching it on a CRT.
Yeah.
It's different than it would be now. And so that was kind of that was my first experience with Blair Witch.
That's a
very
good experience.
Fun. Yes, it was fantastic. Then we went in the house and we watched The Fly, which was another different kind of terrifying. But
wow,
wow, you guys went like you really like artisan 12-year-olds.
It was a lot. It was a long night.
And that's why you're traumatized.
That's why I'm traumatized. But I always carried that with me just for the rest of my life. And then I don't know why, but finally I got you to watch Blair Witch with me.
Yeah, well, so it was my experience is like basically the opposite of yours.
Right.
Because as I was saying in the intro, I wasn't really into horror, hadn't watched a lot of horror, and Blair Witch included. I do remember it, like, because it was so unbelievably zeitgeist in 1999 that like you just couldn't miss it, right? Like you knew what was going on even if you didn't watch the movie. So like I do remember the like, oh my God, there's a movie about these kids that got killed in the woods and they disappeared and it's real and blah, and then I remember the reveal too. I remember like when the news came out that it was like, oh, actually this was just this way they did the film and it's found footage and it was marketing. And like I remember all those steps. I just never saw the movie. So when you finally, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just
Yeah.
It was a good time. It was a good time in film, man.
I mean, 1999 was crazy. Like, spent a whole podcast talking about 1999. But
we'll get into some other highlights of 1999.
Yes.
Don't worry.
Hell yeah. So when you were like, oh, you should watch Blair Witch, I remember kind of going like, well, am I like, who cares? Like,
you're like 36 at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this is like 5 years ago. This was recent. And so I'd had like 15 years to sit and like ruminate on the sort of the meta experience of Blair Witch, and so to me that felt like a gigantic spoiler because like that's as you mentioned, right? Like that's the thing about Blair Witch is that meta experience. But you had me watch it anyway. I was like, fine, I'll watch it.
I think it was
important
that it was going to be overrated. Like I feel like with a lot of classics, especially early classics and like the things that do first, they get overrated and then you go back.
Sure, it's parodied everywhere. I mean, this movie, one of the rare times when I was on its Wikipedia today, it actually just says like a parody section or a little blurb of like, parodied it.
The Scooby-Doo parody is very good.
So influential.
Actually, I want to watch that. But yeah. So I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that. So what shocked me is that I thought that I was just gonna it was just gonna be like watching this movie with all the wind out of its sails, and it's actually my favorite horror movie now.
Really?
Yes, because even accounting for all that, it was still just so well made for so many different like detailed reasons. Like the attention to detail in that movie is incredible. The feeling that it evokes, the acting, like there's just so many good things about it that I was like, wow, this is even with all of that context stuff being sort of like spoilered out, it's still unbelievably good. It really holds up.
It doesn't surprise me you say that, but I'm also a little like because it's literally a 50-50 movie with someone who doesn't either you said you remember but didn't like watch it, I guess, at a young age or didn't see it at the time. Because and I always, like I said, the minor experience is just I remember not backyard, but I remember we rented it for a sleepover, watched it, we were scared, and then years later it was in high school. And I remember I went over to my friend's house and they all had like, I guess they had like their girlfriends or whatever, and I didn't, but I sat down and watched the movie with them, and it was like you split the room in half. Half the room was like, I hate it.
Right.
This is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And the other half, we were just, I was like, oh, it was like, wow, I forgot that was a really creepy movie. Like, I remember that being a good movie.
Which half?
And I always felt that's how the people, like, this is a hard movie, not for me to recommend without being like, you have to buy in 100%.
Sure.
It's a phenomenal movie. I don't want to, like, I think that's awesome. It's your favorite because it's so obscure like that. Like, to pick up on, like, there's so much detail there is. I mean, we're here to talk about the actual movie, but you know, you do start off and just the stories the people tell in the beginning that were plants. Right. They were all plants. They then line up with what they're doing in the woods.
Yeah. It's such masterful foreshadowing. And I think we just recently learned that some of them were actors and some of them were just townspeople that they pulled in. The three main actors didn't know which was which, and they just brought that kind of veracity into the actual production of the film. I thought was really interesting, and like in some ways it sounds like some of the production got a little ethically gray.
It's very ethically
gray.
I think it's weird. Like I said, when we started, I'm kind of just gonna jump around.
Yeah.
Like, the worst thing this movie did was use the actors' real names.
Right. Right.
Because their careers, they didn't have careers after this. Because people either thought, oh, I thought you were dead.
Right.
And that was a reality. And there all seemed to be at peace with, like, it by now. There's a lot of literature about this movie because it was 20 years in 2019.
Right.
But for a while, it was like, well, no one wants to hire me. I'm in the highest grossing movie of the year.
Right.
And I think Heather was the one affected by the most.
Yeah, it seems like Heather Donahue really, because both the gentlemen who played Josh and Mike have still, like, they've still maintained acting careers. I think Josh has gone on to have like a fairly not prolific, but a decent career. And like, he's married to Allison Pill now.
Oh, is he? I didn't know he was married to Allison Pill.
Yeah, he's married to Allison Pill. I just like Wikipedia'd him the other day. I think the gentleman who played Mike I
think he's a guidance counselor.
He's like a guidance counselor now. He did some acting, but it seems like Heather Donahue, and he
counsel people to not go into the woods.
She's a weed farmer now.
Yeah, she's a weed farmer now. But it seems like she kind of bared the brunt of the backlash in some interesting ways. I think part of it is because she's if there's a main character in the movie, she's the main character.
Yeah.
And she also played, I mean, there's no, Final Girls have been complicated figures throughout horror. I think that horror has been cutting edge in terms of its handling of gender equality and gender relations as a genre for a very long time. And I think that the way the character of Heather is played and portrayed, it's so refreshing to watch this even now, like watching this movie from 1999, where this woman is in charge and she's the director. She's telling these guys what to do, and there's clearly conflict there. And she yells and she screams and she says curse words and she
has the space to be a shitty leader, which is like actually really fascinating.
It was
instead of just being like, I'm gonna get us out of here. It is refreshing, and the filmmakers basically they let them do that, right? It's the improv, and they said go about it. And I think she wasn't supposed to be in the movie, and she auditioned, and they were like, this is she is the lead. I always think of it's her movie, it's her movie.
Right.
It's just crazy because of, like you said, like there was the gray areas, like it's an 8-day shoot, and this 8-day shoot has followed these people their whole lives.
Right. Right.
And I think I read they got paid $1,000 a day. And I was
more
like,
than I would expect, honestly.
That's what it said. Who knows if it's so. And actually, it's funny. So I remember a couple of years ago, when I was first interviewing for like jobs and whatnot, I can't figure out who it is. One of the Daniel or Eduardo or some of the producers, they run their own marketing, like advertising agency called Campfire.
Right.
So I remember I was set up by a recruiter interview, and they go to their website, there's this big write up about the Blair Witch and blah blah blah, how they discovered it. I'm reading going, oh, this is gonna be so cool. I turned down the freelance job, I remember, but it was like, this is in the world.
Right.
But yeah, but the actual movie, which is really back to Heather, it's really messed up because you look at it and you go, they nominated her for like a Razzie that year.
Yeah. And I don't
They're
understand.
all amazing they're all great in that movie because it feels real. You're not going to believe that if it's real. Did you guys end up watching the sci-fi documentary about it?
No, we've watched the Scooby-Doo parody. That's
okay. So
we haven't watched the documentary. I really want to. It just I don't know.
It's on Vimeo.
Yeah, we should.
Is it?
I can send you guys a link. I watched it today at work. Sorry, work.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just like the movie. Like if you weren't paying attention, you would just think it was a 1999 like A&E documentary about, or a History Channel documentary about, urban legends.
Right.
But so I know we're jumping around, and I feel like we barely even talked about the movie. I'm just going to rattle off some facts that I thought were interesting. We'll go back to the movie.
Yeah.
We said that it took 8 days to shoot, but 8 months to edit. I thought that was pretty interesting.
That makes sense.
Yeah. The real town of Burkittsville were so awash with fans that they never actually screened the movie in the cinema, and all their property was like stolen and damaged from just like tourists.
Ugh.
That sucks.
Just crazy Gen Xers, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Just,
Man.
and it was originally such low quality. The studio wanted to remake it.
Right.
That happens all the time.
Yeah.
Here's a movie, which glad they didn't, because that's its charm.
Yeah.
Oh, if that had gotten productionized, if that had gotten glossy, I mean, I think that they even ended up. I know that there were issues, quote unquote, with the end because it has a very, in some ways, it has a very ambiguous end. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who's maybe not seen it.
Oh, we're gonna spoil it. You could spoil it.
We're past the spoiler years.
Oh, the ending.
The
I think that's today, right? Talking about it is because that ending.
Yeah, the ending was shocking at the time. It was ambiguous. You weren't sure. All of a sudden, the characters are walking into a room, and then there's someone standing in the corner, and then the camera falls, and that's the end of it. Like, really, that's the end of the movie. The camera falls down, and we don't see what happens to these people. And
it's so good.
It's so good. But I think the studio that bought the movie from Sundance, I think they wanted to remake the ending. I think it didn't test well at the time, and they shot 4 different endings. And thank God they didn't use any of them. Thank God they were the original.
What I read today was that, and then it was they asked because it killed at Sundance. Like that's what we also got to admit. This was like we haven't mentioned. This was a Sundance darling.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
Yeah.
And they apparently the room of 20 people or whatever in their test screening, they were like, "Did you get the ending?" And everyone said no, but they said, "Were you scared?" And 19 out of 20 were like, "Oh, like absolutely, like shit my pants."
Not be like.
So I would like to go see this in the theaters. Like I watched it this last night and this morning just to refresh, and it's just a different experience at home.
Right.
It is definitely the movie that I think, if anything, we're going to talk about on this podcast. It's just atmosphere, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
There's a storytelling, but it's all atmosphere.
You don't see anything. There's no monsters.
There's no monsters.
There's no ghost to see.
Right. And the thing that really got me about it, the first thing, so we were talking a little bit about movies are always about more than what they're about, especially horror movies.
Sure.
I feel like the Blair Witch does such a good job with that to me, in the sense of how terrifying it is to be lost, and they keep bringing it up in the movie too. Heather says "Oh, we're in America. You can't get lost in America," and that's part of what makes it so scary. Is that we don't really have that risk anymore. So for them actually facing that risk is so. And that's that's the atmosphere that really
hunted.
Yeah, hunted, and
there was a line that resonated with me today, or when I was watching it about Today, is at the end when he's like, "Why are you still filming?" And she's like, "This is all I could do."
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, today's October 4th, if anyone's listening, like Facebook went down today and half the world,
Lost their mind.
Facebook and Gmail and I think Instagram went down for a minute and half the world lost their mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
and it was very reminiscent of today because it's like, why are you filming? And they kind of do answer that question in this. That's
Yeah.
what a lot of like these found footage movies fail to do.
They did
Well,
a
we
really
talked
yeah,
about that.
sorry, go ahead. I know what you're
Yeah.
gonna say.
Yeah, we talked about that because it feels like it's so interesting watching like the first of its kind type thing because this movie was so influential. It like spawned like like an incredibly popular, prolific genre
It
of found
became
footage.
the genre.
It became
for a
the
long
genre.
time.
Yeah,
But watching the first iteration of it, like watching the found footage movie, it's so interesting to note things like how often and how meticulously they justify why are you still filming? Why are you
Mhm.
filming? Why is this a documentary? They do that in like 3 or 4 different
In
places.
the very beginning, they set up like, oh, we have extra batteries. We could power a small town to justify why they're able to have the cameras be powered for the next week or however
4
long they're
days or 5
True.
days. Yeah.
And then
And the scene that you mentioned where, she says, and I believe it, that she says like, oh, if I view it through the lens of the camera, then it's
not
less
reality.
real, it's less
Yeah.
scary. And
It's
they have that
so-
scene. Yeah, they have the scene where like, instead of Heather filming, Josh is now filming her and saying like, "Oh, why are you still filming? God damn it! Like,
Yeah.
what's your motivation?" And it's like such a really
Heartbreaking.
good character moment for her, but then it also serves to reinforce this like the movie keeps telling me why they're filming, so I never kind of have that moment of like, wait,
No one
why?
would be filming.
No one would be
this, yeah.
filming at this point. Like by the time we get to the end, I'm like, yeah, I think they might actually be filming this.
They might film it. They have the big light at the end too, like because that ending is so frantically edited
Yeah.
to where you're not thinking about the filming at the same time, but you do see them with the cameras, and I'm like, well, they're
Right.
using it to light their way to get through there.
Right,
Mhm.
right, yeah, because
Um,
they become. I mean, at that point, I think, yeah, they've lost their packs or they don't have anything on them anymore besides their cameras, and yeah, it's using the camera light as the flashlight as
Yeah.
they're running a fucking haunted house that they found in the middle of the woods, just and they're
Even
friends.
the
Terrifying.
the poster scene, the trailer scene of Heather and the upshot and the snot and it's just raw. Like I don't know how to describe
Yeah.
it. Like and like she's recording herself just to give a testimonial in case she dies
Right,
Yeah.
or
right.
whatever. Like it's
She's apologizing to all their mothers.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the apologies are so good.
And I just based on that scene alone, like it's criminal that she didn't have just a flourishing career after that.
no.
It's
I
criminal.
heard it. I remember I want to say it was Paul Scheer telling a story on a podcast. I don't know Paul Scheer. That would be weird.
If you listen to him on a podcast, you know him. It's
Yeah,
I
the
know him, but I was listening to him on I think it was him. I was listening to him on a podcast, and real briefly, I remember he said he was like working at like an improv or something like that, and it was right after that movie was released. And she came to one of the things, and it was like the biggest celebrity had showed up to the improv, but she had like bodyguards with her.
Oh my god.
Very like not like I if I remember the story correctly, not very like standoffishly, just like it was a scene because Heather was there, and it was
Right.
like her career should have flourished. She shouldn't have been like I guess when I was reading her thing today, I was like she was in a random episode of It's Always Sunny. Like when she was probably she probably was no one in the episode.
Right.
Wow.
Background or bit character.
It just said it in a blur, like in I didn't look at her IMDb, just in the Wikipedia write up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I was reading stuff from her, and yeah, she was basically saying that, especially because her name had been used in the film, that people just didn't want to have her read at auditions. There was just backlash, and it's just there would not be that backlash today because you cannot replicate Blair Witch in that way because
No,
it wasn't the first found footage, but it was the first of its kind
It's
in that way.
yeah, I want to touch on you guys mentioned that, and I found footage is really interesting because yeah, like horror nerds are, and I'm not a horror nerd. I'm just have a horror podcast, but horror nerds will say like,
That
oh,
might
the
make
first
you a
found
horror
footage is. I think that does make me a horror nerd. I'll wear it with a badge of honor. But the first one they consider is Cannibal
nerd.
Holocaust,
Yeah.
and I've seen like I remember I think I watched like 45 minutes of it like in like high school kind of when I was like, oh, I'm gonna get into like weird movies. It's nothing special. It's actually more deals with like a cult and finding a cult, but it's like a tribe. And that movie had the filmmakers had to go and be like, no, to court and be like, no, my actors are alive.
Right.
And there was a lot of unethical stuff on that set. It was like it was an Italian film, I believe.
Yeah. There was animal
but that was
there was just
like eating animals and stuff.
Not good.
No. But this is the first of its kind, and it struck lightning, right? It struck lightning, and I don't know how they fumbled the sequel. I've never seen Book of Shadows. I just remember being a joke.
Yeah.
I think it's a meta movie. I think it's about the movie. I think it's might be wrong. Anyway, I want to watch it because I kind of sadistically like that era of bad horror movies, like 2000 to like 2004. Like it's some really weird movies in there.
Everything was trying to be The Ring. Everything was trying to be Grudge. Like
I actually don't. And, meta movie. You said, "Oh no," but like, I don't know.
It should be good.
It feels like that's the right way to go for Blair Witch, because the first one was like, you can't escape the context of Blair Witch. You know what I mean?
True.
It's like
that's true.
Book of Shadows. I like the name. I don't know if it was meta. I might have made that up.
I want to watch the new one. There's like a new one that's just called Blair Witch.
Yeah, I thought I watched it. It got good reviews. It did, like, people liked it that I know. I thought I had watched it. I didn't. But anyway, so I do think there's a misconception that like all of a sudden these movies followed like this trend of found footage after Blair Witch, but it really didn't. I mean, there's a 9-year gap between this and Paranormal Activity.
Right.
9 years, I would say, like 8.
Paranormal Activity was like 2008.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
And to me, that's the one that is where I think it just ended. Let's say 3 years ago, the trend. But then after that, it was like the studio said, "Oh, someone made a movie. It cost $1 million, and it's gonna get. We could cut a trailer together with some reactions, and we're just gonna print money until no one wants this anymore." And there's some really good movies in this genre.
Right. I love Paranormal Activity. Like Paranormal Activity is also up there for me.
I'm a fan of the first and third one.
Yes, the first one is like untouchable.
Yeah.
Number 2, good to watch if you want to like have the story continuity. Mm-hmm. Number 3, like
is 3 the one with the swinging camera? Is that one?
That's that one.
Yeah, I also really dive into urban legend stuff. So like that was interesting. So you have that series, and that series to me is what propelled it, right? And like it really. But the Blair Witch is the first, and it's the first you can't replicate.
Right.
I mean, because
the meta, you can't replicate the meta. You can't have people at Sundance passing around missing persons flyers, and you can't have the studio buying the film. And because I think the initial film's budget was like the shooting budget was only like $35,000, and then those hundreds of thousands of other dollars that came in, I think, were for like all of the marketing that came after Sundance and like shooting the new endings and all of the meta stuff around it.
Yeah, they returned a camera to Circuit City after the 8 days and got money back.
Oh
which,
man,
like, helps that return on investment.
I mean, yeah, with the amount of money it made, that actually helps. The denominator is already so small.
I was trying to. I have a coworker. I was trying to explain this movie to him today. I mean, he's about 4 years younger than me.
Okay.
So, and he was like, "Oh no," and I was just very much like, "No, like it's not like," because he was talking about Cloverfield, and I'm like, "It's not like Cloverfield." So that was a studio movie, and you just followed a marketing campaign because you were curious.
Right.
I said, people went to this and thought it was real, and to this day, there is someone that will probably argue with that it was real.
Right.
Why they would, but that happens.
It was actually funny. Sorry to interrupt, but it was we just watched it again recently ourselves, and something that we noticed about the meta story of it that it really reminded me of was something that I always learned when I was in film school was like, when movies were first starting back in the turn of the century, like one of the first things was that a train was filmed. And
that's a good urban legend.
And then did it actually happen? Do you know?
No, I believe it's an urban legend. I've heard that before too. I bet you could believe it.
I'm gonna operate as if it was real.
Because another just like personal part of, not personal, but so I live in New Jersey, and in high school in New Jersey, for almost everyone, you guys familiar with Weird New Jersey? That book series?
I know the series, but I
know
have
the series,
not
yeah.
have not read it.
Okay, so it's just a book series. Like, basically, when you get your car, you find a couple of these things to do.
Okay.
So them running around in that house reminds me of, we never went camping in the woods like that. Like, I went camping with my brother once when we were in our 20s, and he idiotically got lost in the woods, and I was very scared for his life.
Oh, it was the Blair
But
Witch.
that's a different type of scare.
Sure.
But no, but like, so with Jersey, it's like common. You find the book, and they all got demolished recently, but you go to like a lot of psych wards, and you could just kind of sneak in. And I remember with friends, like, kind of we were saying, like, you buying into the movie, you gotta buy you buy into it, and you could get yourself pretty scared.
Right.
Real scary part is that the floors probably could fall underneath you, and who knows? Because that's like old psychiatric wards, and there was one where there's a school that burned down, and it was in the middle of the woods.
Oof.
It's really creepy. Like, at this park, we have a friend running there, and I mean, there's a lot of vines and trees and but walking around, you're pretty freaked out, and it's like a real life Blair Witch experience. But
and I feel like having the context of something like a Blair Witch makes those things even scarier. Like, if you have the context of Blair Witch and you've got like Silent Hill and you've got all of that marinating in the back of your brain. It's like, when I was growing up, there was the abandoned hospital in my very suburban town, and when you're in high school, you'd go with your friends and you'd break into the abandoned hospital, and it was terrifying. But it was probably more terrifying because you're going to get arrested by security guards.
Sure.
And B, something's going to fall on you, or a scalpel's going to fly out of a cabinet you open up. But it's just scary because you have all of this context that's not real context, but you're thinking, oh, a Blair Witch is going to come out of that door, a zombie's going to come out from over there. Yeah.
And what we were talking about the other day too is that the context in the movie itself is also everything, because they don't show. Not only do they not show any ghosts or anything, they certainly don't show the Blair Witch, right? Like they don't even suggest the Blair Witch anytime after they're talking to the townsfolk.
Right.
So that literally all the Blair Witch is an urban legend to set the mood and to set the tone.
And that's how urban legends are.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Just set the tone, and everyone has a different story of it.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And I don't know, like, more so you, Kayla, like, because when you watched it, like, I know I had a visual of what I think she looks like.
I
made it in my head like it's probably more looks like the witch from Snow White, like just an old decrepit witch.
Interesting.
I want to talk a little bit about the juxtaposition, because I remember seeing the trailer for Blair Witch and Phantom, because I'm a big Star Wars fan, and like, we did the whole thing when I was in high school, right? This was like our senior year of high school. We waited in line for Phantom Menace, and I remember seeing the trailer.
Meet Joe Black? It was Meet Joe Black, right?
What was
there a trailer?
The Phantom Menace trailer played in front of Meet Joe Black, and then like most people left the movie Meet Joe Black. That's the story I know of.
Don't remember that. I don't
Sorry,
think
that was always like what I've read of like.
I have not heard that.
I had not heard that.
They premiered Phantom Menace in front of Meet Joe Black.
People waiting. They just wanted to see the trailer.
Yeah.
Oh, poor Meet Joe Black.
That really sucks for that film.
No, you're talking about seeing the actual Phantom Menace.
Oh, you're talking about anyway. Sorry,
the opposite. Yeah, so seeing the trailer for Blair Witch.
Blair Witch
head of
the
Phantom
trailer.
Menace.
Yeah, the Blair Witch trailer was before Phantom Menace.
Okay.
It's about the juxtaposition. Like, those two movies could not have been any different in terms of like their production value. I mean, I was a Star Wars. I'm still a Star Wars fan, but I remember just like a lot of that movie just didn't really feel like it had any soul, because of like the CG. Like, that final battle with all the droids was like a cartoon. Like, it didn't really have any impact for me. And so anyway, it was just to illustrate how productionized it was, how CGI it was, how tech, like you said, tech influenced it was. And then to have that juxtaposition against something like Blair Witch, which is completely opposite.
There's nothing.
It's really
There's nothing in it.
Like,
nothing happens.
But you mentioned soul, and Blair Witch is all soul.
Right.
So I'm gonna look up actually our top 10 grossing 1999, because I think this is. I do have something to read. Because it is an interesting list.
Yeah.
Right.
So. Okay. Oh, I really thought. Oh, the Blair Witch is 10.
Wow.
The Blair Witch is 10, and then it goes 9. Runaway Bride, The Mummy, Big Daddy, Tarzan, The
was the Mummy.
Matrix, Toy
Okay.
Story 2, Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me, and The Sixth Sense, and then Phantom Menace.
Just icon after icon, like stuff that the Mummy at the time I remember being like, what is this? And now, oh man, I want
Mummy.
the Mummy was so
Yeah.
Powers, I forgot.
Rachel Weisz, come on.
Yeah.
It's a weird, just a little tangent because I heard it recently. There's a weird thing with years and box office, right? And box office doesn't mean a movie's good. I think we all know that. But after essentially 2000, I mean, I guess the Phantom Menace is number 1, but it was Star Wars after so many years. But up until like 2002, that's when all of a sudden, post then, like almost every year, it's a sequel. Sequels just start IP and sequels start dominating, our movies. Pre that is when you get like that's a diverse list to throw the Matrix, Sixth Sense, and the Mummy and hell, Runaway Bride surprises me on there, right?
Yeah.
But so what I wanted to read though about this is just this last paragraph from Roger Ebert's review. And as he just says, at the time when digital techniques can show us almost anything, the Blair Witch Project is a reminder that what really scares us is the stuff we can't see. The noise in the dark is almost always scarier than what makes the noise in the dark. Any kid could tell you that, not that he believes it at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was like, that was a really great little, because it sums everything up.
Right.
And honestly, even like we talk about another 1999 movie, The Sixth Sense.
Right.
That has that same, like, you don't really know that's a very kept in the dark movie.
Right.
So I know we're kind of running all over the place, but back to the actual movie. What do you guys think the ending is, or what do you think? I know I have my own theory of what we watched. But I'd like to hear if you guys have any theory on it, or you just take it as what it is.
Part of what I love about this movie is, and so like we were just talking about this the other day too when we were watching. I sound like a broken record here.
Yeah.
But it does a really good job of ambiguity. Like I think there's some movies that feel like I didn't care for the ambiguity in Inception, for example. Right?
Okay.
It felt like a little tacked on. Right? It felt like the movie was kind of about something else, and then at the end it was like, and was any of it real? Oh, you decide. Like it just kind of felt like, just like stuck on at the end.
The Nolan
Whereas
effect.
Blair Witch, it really felt, yeah, exactly. And Blair Witch, it feels though more like they really worked for it, because there were so many pieces of evidence that you really could powerfully put into play on either side of whether it's supernatural or whether it's just that, or whether it's not. Right? So like you could sit there and say
somebody, like a person.
It could be someone fucking with them. They introduced like 9 different characters at the beginning.
Townsfolk.
Any of them could have done it. So they all knew where they were going.
Right.
It could have just been somebody in the woods. And you pointed out when we were watching it, like by the time they get to like day 3 and they're like starving, they're probably running on very little sleep. Right. So like, there's a lot of, is what they're hearing actually out there? It's kind of hard for us to hear sometimes.
Right.
Like maybe Josh really did just get lost.
Right. Or go crazy or run off. And I know that, not to interrupt you, but there is also a theory. It's not really a theory that I subscribe to, but I think it's an interesting theory that that Josh and Mike are like gaslighting Heather.
Yeah.
Actually them doing this stuff. And so I think that they're just to tack on to your point.
That's another explanation. Yeah.
There are physical explanations for what goes on.
Right. And that's what I think is so great. And then it goes right up to that line. Right. Like it almost crosses the like, no, it's definitely ghosts line, but it doesn't quite cross that line. I think I had to pick a favorite. I want to say that there's something supernatural, and I think for me it comes down to them getting lost. It feels like the forest is working against them somehow. That's just me.
No, I'm somewhat in agreement with you. I always thought it was just purgatory or something, that they're there in this endless loop of forest.
Right, they literally loop around. They walk one direction and they find themselves looping around.
So I've always just found is purgatory, and whether the supernatural's happening there, it's happening, but it's who knows? They could have died at some point before or in, but they're trapped in there.
Yeah.
The way that I kind of like the mythology I've built in my head for the movie is that the Blair Witch is a supernatural entity, and it's not necessarily a witch that's running around the woods.
Sure.
It is some sort of evil entity that influences things to happen. So one of the big things when they're talking in the beginning is there was a man in the 40s who murdered 7 children in the town, and he murdered. Oh God, terrifying.
Sorry.
No, that's great.
It's so good. He would take he took them all from the town. He would take them to this house in the woods, and he would murder them in twos. He would put one facing the corner, kill one, and then kill the one facing the corner. And something that I didn't notice until the second viewing was that 7 kids is not an even number. It's not possible to kill 7 kids in twos.
Right.
But with these three main characters who ultimately all end up, spoiler alert, all end up at that house that these children were killed in. You add doing some math here. You add 3 to 7, that's 10. Oh, finally you have an even number. Somebody killed a bunch of kids, quote unquote, in these pairs of 2. So I feel like there was some sort of event that the Blair Witch was influencing that made this man go crazy and kill these children. And now that story has kind of been completed. These kids came sniffing around and they've ultimately completed.
So are you basically just suggesting that this whole horrific incident was just like some dude had like mad OCD about killing kids?
I think the Blair Witch was like, it's got to be.
That's interesting.
Man, it's got to be an even number.
Evens, yeah. The word. I just because it sounds like we all read the same theories at certain points. The worst one I think I read was the one of like it's just people holding them up. Like if you look to the left of the screen, like there's actually this was just a badly written one. It was like there's probably someone with a gun pointing the back of Josh's
get out
screen, and it was like no, what?
No,
why would I write that?
No,
sorry, it was so dumb I had to share it.
No, in my mind,
that's a good share.
That's so heavy. That's so heavy, yours, Kayla, of like the even numbers and they lord them there. I don't. That's
that's getting too complicated. I think ultimately what I believe is that this location is evil and deadly, and they have wandered into this evil and deadly location. And what happens at the end is they are killed by the supernatural. It's not. No one's holding them up with a gun. Get out of here. But they ultimately are taken out by this supernatural area that they have wandered into, and it just happens that if they fulfill that kind of like prophecy, because now there's an even number of kids. They make a big point in the movie of being like they're killed in twos.
No, that's attentive.
But they also give other little bits of evidence too. And again, we just noticed this in this latest viewing was when they went to visit the crazy lady. I forget her name.
Oh, the lady.
Yeah, she really stands out.
Yeah,
I don't remember her name, but
quite a bit.
Barbara.
Yeah, something like that. But when they go into her, like trailer house, whatever, there's a little gate, and the gate to get in was lashed sticks.
Oh,
like those little.
Yeah.
It kind of looks like the effigies a little bit. So that's like, yet another thing like, it could be if she's
just be her
lashing sticks together here. Maybe she's lashing sticks together over there.
Could just be the crazy lady from.
Yeah, the detail, right? And they did that on purpose because, I mean, with over 20 years the movie's released, and you look it up and like, I'm the worst, and it's like Blair Witch ending explained, like, just because I'm curious what's written at this point.
I want to know, yeah.
And there's a lot of articles and they don't have any answers.
Sure.
Every article's that headline, and then producers said they left it open to be vague for the point of the purpose of people discuss. Right. It's like, great.
Yeah.
I've never noticed the effigies though on her door. That's
It's like it's the sticks that are tied together.
The gate itself.
The gate itself is in the same style.
But it's that placement of that kind of stuff that makes me feel, because like normally, I don't say normally, but like ambiguity when it's not well done, it kind of annoys me, right? Because I'm like, man,
give me an answer.
But when you do all this work and like plant all these little clues that like give you support if you want to argue it one way or the other, then I feel like it's cool and justified, and like I can sit here and construct a theory.
Sure. The worst found footage movie of all time. would be the devil inside, and I just like to get the word out about that.
Is that the one that's in the Paris catacombs, or is that?
Yeah, not catacombs one, but it's in the Vatican.
Oh.
And anyway, so this movie is, it was the worst movie I've ever seen. I've talked about plenty of podcasts. I have to footage. It does the whole horror thing. You know it's gonna be whatever. It doesn't do the Blair Witch ending. It ends with a car crash, and then a title comes up and it says, "Go to this website to learn more about this case."
I'm sorry.
What?
I'm here to watch a movie.
And then you went to the website, right? And then the website wasn't running, and it was opening weekend.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I'm not kidding.
Oh my
Oh,
god!
It was the worst experience I ever had.
Wow.
Someone got very fired.
That's like the movie version of blue screen.
Yeah. Oh.
It's like I know I just watched a bad movie, but this has solidified itself. I've said it on every time I get a chance. The worst. So, but back to this good one. Do you guys have anything to add? I feel like we've covered just a lot about like the culture and the actual movie and
I feel like I could
characters.
talk forever about Blair Witch, so we'll have to cut it off at some point.
Yeah,
but
I think for me,
talk all
things
day.
about Blair Witch are that it does such a good job of that intangible mood setting, tone setting, atmosphere. You feel freaked out with them. Their little petty arguments that like suddenly become magnified. You feel that. Yeah, like they do just the most amazing job with all that tone setting, and related to that is the attention to detail, right? Like all the little details that contribute to that. I think those are the things that, even though the sort of the meta context was deflated for me, still make it my favorite part.
Right.
I think talking to you specifically, Chris, is going to change my tune if I need to recommend it to someone or like have a recommendation, because it might be their favorite movie.
Yeah.
Instead of the fear of not getting it right.
Right.
Like I'm sure we've all recommended things to people, and you're like,
Right.
I thought it was good.
Yeah. That gets hard, but yeah, I feel like with Blair Witch, it is one of those rare things where it did not get overhyped. It's not one of those things that you return to it and it's been done so many times that now it doesn't feel fresh. It's still even in this like very oversaturated landscape where there has been so many found footage films since 2008, it brings something new to the table. It has a new conversation with you. It has something new to say. And I think that's something that does make media from 1999 very special in particular. I think that is something that we saw a lot, is that a lot of these movies that we've talked about in the TV shows, they had something new to say that has remained fresh since then.
Yeah, Matrix Fight.
It's timeless.
Space even.
A lot of timelessness that feels very applicable whenever you revisit it, and Blair Witch is the perfect example of that.
I wouldn't be surprised if in an account, just to put on what you're saying, an account today uploaded footage from the Blair Witch and resold it on TikTok in 3-minute segments.
Oh yeah.
And working. And I'm not even saying that to be negative, because of it has a timeless factor to it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's excellent. I mean, this. No, I have nothing to add to this. You guys have said everything, like perfectly. It's just I don't know why you made it to the end of this episode if you haven't watched the movie, but watch it. And watch it with like friends, or
watch it again.
Just set yourself up in an atmosphere to watch it. That's my recommendation.
That is a good rec, actually. Yeah, watch it out in the woods if you can.
Run an extension cord to a tent in your backyard.
Yeah, grab a CRT.
So, but once again, thanks for coming on, guys. Where can the good people find you?
Take it away.
We are on any place you can listen to podcasts. You can listen to Cult or Just Weird. You can also listen to us online, cultorjustweird.com. We have our episodes up there.
You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Twitter, we're at Cult or Just Weird. And I think at Instagram, we're at Cult or Just Weirdos.
Weirdos, yeah. Instagram's more important because we actually put up
a lot of
images to go with our shows.
Oh, follow that one right now.
Jokes. I just make really stupid jokes on
Twitter. Is a lot of your dumb jokes.
So don't bother with Twitter.
So we're on Twitter all day here. So Cult or Just Weirdos, follow. There we go. Then excellent. Please, everyone, go give them a follow. You can follow me at Chindango1 or catch whatever we're doing on the Flyover State of Film Network. Stay frightful.